I sat at the end of the dinner table, just like I always did, quiet, ignored, the old man in the wrinkled coat who still rode the bus. My daughter's husband raised his wine glass and smirked. The old man still doesn't own a car. How cute. The room laughed. Even my daughter looked away. So I reached into my pocket, pulled out my keys, and laid them gently on the table. The Bugatti emblem caught the candlelight, and the silence that followed was the most satisfying moment of my entire life. But that night wasn't about the car. It was about the years of sacrifice they never saw, and the daughter I was finally ready to fight for. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I never minded taking the bus. Even after I retired, even after the numbers in my bank account could have comfortably bought me a whole fleet of blacked-out SUVs with more horsepower than good sense, I stuck with my pass and my routine. There was something honest about public transportation. No pretense, no performance. Just people trying to get somewhere. That's all I'd ever tried to do. So when my daughter married into a family who wore their wealth like skin, I learned early on to make myself small at gatherings. I smiled, nodded, listened. Never corrected anyone when they assumed I couldn't afford what they flaunted. My name's Raymond. I'm a retired aerospace engineer. Built satellites and guidance systems for 35 years. But at dinners with my daughter's in-laws, I might as well have been a janitor. They talked about markets and brands and which country had the best private doctors. Her husband, Jeremy, loved to throw around acronyms like IPO and NFT as if they were personal friends of his. The in-laws weren't cruel, not outright, but everything about them was polished and pointed. From their manicured laughter to the way they glanced at my coat, slightly wrinkled from the bus ride over. That night's dinner was supposed to be casual, just family. Jeremy's parents hosted in their sterile white dining room, where the only warmth came from the expensive sconces on the wall. My daughter, Emily, greeted me with a hug that felt more like an apology. I brought a bottle of wine, something aged and thoughtful. They poured it and didn't comment. Jeremy talked stocks. His father chimed in with some real estate jargon. I nodded, half listening, watching the clock and counting the courses. Then came dessert, and with it, the comment. Jeremy leaned back, fork still in hand, and looked right at me. The old man still doesn't own a car. How cute. The way he said it, it wasn't just a joke. It was a dismissal, a public pat on the head like I was some relic from a simpler time. His mother chuckled into her napkin. His father gave one of those tight-lipped smirks. Even Emily. She didn't laugh, but she didn't say anything either. Just looked down at her plate like it might offer a way out. I sat there for a second, heart ticking louder than the antique clock on the wall. Years of staying quiet, of letting it slide, rose up like bile. I reached into my coat pocket slowly, set my keys on the table, gently, purposefully. The Bugatti emblem caught the light like a spark. Sorry, I said, calm as ever. I had to park far. Didn't want to outshine the Toyotas. And just like that, the room froze. You could hear the silverware shift as their hands twitched, unsure of whether to laugh, apologize, or stay perfectly still. It was a beautiful moment, not because I embarrassed them, but because for the first time in that room, I watched a crack form in their mask of superiority. Jeremy's eyes darted to the emblem, then to my face, then back again, trying to decide if he'd misjudged me all along or if this was some elaborate joke. His mother stared, jaw slightly open, blinking as if the lighting had played a trick. Even his father, usually stone-faced, looked at me like he had just discovered the hired help owned the building. Emily's face was the one I couldn't quite read. It wasn't shock. It wasn't even embarrassment. It was something murkier, discomfort, maybe, or guilt. Like she suddenly remembered who I was before she met Jeremy. Like she realized how little of that man she defended in this new version of her life. Jeremy chuckled, trying to brush it off. Well, I'll be damned. Didn't know you were into cars, Ray. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch. Let them sit in it. Then I said, I'm not. Never have been. He laughed again, but this one was hollow. Then why the Bugatti? Because when you've worked your whole life to provide for your family, it's nice to buy one ridiculous thing. Once. I took a sip of my wine and never mentioned it again. No one spoke after that. Dessert sat untouched. The conversation meandered towards safer territory, golf, a new sushi place opening downtown, but the room never quite relaxed again. Jeremy avoided my eyes. His mother glanced at my keys every few minutes like they might bite her. I could feel it shifting, the balance in the room. It was like watching a wolf pack realize the old dog they'd been nipping at could still bite. But the victory didn't taste as sweet as I'd imagined. The bitterness of the years I'd spent being the silent one lingered. I'd been invited to this table dozens of times, and not once had anyone asked about my work, my life, my story. They assumed I was nobody because I didn't perform well the way they did. And Emily, she let them. The dinner wrapped early. Everyone suddenly had early meetings or traffic concerns. I stood to leave, slipping the keys back into my pocket like they were nothing. Emily walked me out to the curb, arms folded, her silk blouse catching the porch light. "You really bought a Bugatti?" she asked, voice low. "I did." She nodded slowly. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I looked at her, really looked. The face I once used to cradle when she cried over scraped knees or high school breakups now had tension in the jaw, a practiced distance in the eyes. "Because you stopped asking." She blinked. That hit her. "Dad, that's not fair. Isn't it?" I asked gently. "When was the last time you asked how I was doing? Not what I needed. Not what bills were due. Just how I was doing." She didn't answer, just stared at the ground. "I don't say this to hurt you, but somewhere along the way, you traded connection for image. And I didn't say anything because I wanted you to be happy. But tonight made something very clear." She swallowed hard. "What?" "That man you married doesn't respect me. And worse, he thinks you don't either." She opened her mouth, then closed it. He jokes. He doesn't mean it." I nodded. "If I ever joked about your mother like that, do you think she would have stayed quiet?" That brought tears to her eyes. My wife had passed 6 years ago, and the loss still hovered in both of us, like smoke after a fire. She shook her head. "No, she wouldn't have." I stepped closer, softened my voice. "You don't have to defend me, Emily, but you do have to decide what kind of marriage you want, what kind of respect you demand. Because tonight, you let him humiliate me, and you didn't flinch." She cried then, quietly, no drama. Just the slow leak of someone realizing something uncomfortable about themselves. I hugged her, because no matter what, she was still my daughter. But as I turned to leave, I didn't look back. Some lessons needed to settle without a witness. That night, I didn't drive the Bugatti. I took the bus home. The keys stayed in my pocket the whole ride, warm against my thigh like a loaded pistol I had no intention of firing again. I sat by the window, watching the city roll past in flashes of light and shadow. I thought about the years, how I'd worked double shifts when Emily was a baby, how I stayed up nights fixing prototypes, how I'd once sold my only watch to pay for her college prep courses. None of that showed in my shoes or my coat. But it was real. It mattered. And I realized something on that ride. Wealth isn't what you show. It's what you survive. It's what you build in silence while everyone else is making noise. I'd survived a lot, and I'd built more than they would ever know. The next morning, Emily texted, "Can we talk sometime this week? Just us." I stared at the screen for a long while before replying. Yes, I'd like that. She needed to find her own way through this. But maybe, just maybe, the fog had started to lift. The next time I saw Jeremy, it wasn't planned. 3 days had passed since that dinner, and I had taken the Bugatti out for a drive, more out of necessity than statement. I was heading back from the credit union when I saw him, standing outside a coffee shop, talking to 2 of his friends, one of them wearing loafers with no socks and sunglasses that didn't match the weather. Normally, I would have driven past without a second thought, but Jeremy saw me before I could disappear. His eyes tracked the car like a dog spotting a steak. I pulled up to the curb. There was no point in pretending we hadn't seen each other. He walked over slowly, his tone trying to sound casual, but edged with unease. "That yours?" I looked at him, then at the car. "License plate says so." He gave a tight laugh. "Didn't know aerospace paid that well." "It does," I said plainly. "If you stay in it long enough, live below your means, and don't try to impress people who already think they're better than you." He nodded, face stiff. "Look, about the other night." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't explain it away. You meant what you said. He opened his mouth, paused, then closed it. I could tell he wasn't used to being spoken to like this, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. Maybe he thought marrying Emily had elevated him to a place where her family should feel lucky to orbit him. I didn't move. I let him sit in the discomfort. After a beat, he sighed. It was a joke, Ray. That's just how we talk. That's how you talk, I corrected. The rest of us are just too polite to call it what it is. He took a step back, folding his arms. So what? You came to that dinner just to humiliate me. I stared at him, and for a moment, I genuinely couldn't believe the question. You mocked me, in front of your entire family. And you want to play the victim now because I had the audacity to own something nicer than you expected? He didn't answer, just looked away. I continued. You judged me because I don't drive a car. You assumed that meant I couldn't afford one. That's not a joke, Jeremy. That's arrogance disguised as humor. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. And here's the real problem. You're not embarrassed because you insulted me. You're embarrassed because I proved you wrong in front of people who matter to you. That's the part that stings. He met my eyes then. Finally. So what? Now you're going to parade the car around. Make me look small every chance you get. No, I said calmly. I don't need to. You do that all by yourself. I left him standing there and pulled off without a dramatic engine rev or screeching tires. The Bugatti is capable of that kind of exit, but I didn't need the noise. I had already said what needed saying. That evening, Emily showed up at my house. No warning, no text. Just the sound of her knocking, 3 soft taps, spaced apart like she wasn't sure if she wanted me to open the door. I let her in. She stood in the entryway like a stranger, clutching her purse with both hands. Hey, she said softly. Hey, I replied. Coffee. She nodded. I went to the kitchen and put on a pot. We sat in silence while it brewed. When I handed her the mug, she looked up at me and said, He told me what happened. Outside the cafe. I took my seat. I figured he would. She sipped, then looked down. He says you embarrassed him. I didn't say anything he didn't deserve. She flinched. I know. I'm not defending him. That surprised me. Her voice was calm, but not defensive, not like last time. She set her cup down. I've been thinking about what you said. About me not asking. About letting things slide. I nodded, waiting. She drew a deep breath. You're right. I've been pretending everything's okay when it's not. Jeremy talks too much. He shows off. And yeah, sometimes he crosses lines. But I kept hoping if I just ignored it long enough, he'd settle down. That's not how people grow, I said. That's how they get worse. She nodded, her eyes damp. I think I've been afraid. Afraid to challenge him. Afraid to admit I've changed. And I hated the way he talked to you. I hated that I didn't stop him. I didn't know how. You do now? Silence stretched between us. Not heavy, just full. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Why the Bugatti, Dad? You've never been that guy. I smiled, a little sad. It wasn't about the car. It was about reminding myself who I am. I've spent years letting people believe I'm someone I'm not. Because I thought it didn't matter. Because I thought keeping the peace was more important than demanding respect. She bit her lip. I think I forgot who you were too. Then let's both start remembering. The fallout came quietly. Jeremy's parents didn't invite me to the next family dinner. No one said it aloud, but the absence of an invitation said more than any words. Emily noticed too. They think you're showing off now, she told me one night over the phone. They're embarrassed. I chuckled. They weren't embarrassed when they assumed I was poor. Exactly, she said. It only bothers them because it flips the script. In the weeks that followed, things shifted. Jeremy stayed quieter around me. He didn't joke anymore. Not the biting kind, anyway. I could see the effort, even if it was half-hearted. Emily visited more often, sometimes alone. And each time, I saw her shoulders loosen a little more. Like she was peeling off armor she didn't realize she'd put on. One afternoon, she asked if we could go for a drive. In the Bugatti, she asked, half laughing. Sure, I said. Just don't spill anything. We drove along the coast, windows down, the engine purring beneath us like a sleeping giant. She told me about her job, her fears, her frustrations. I listened. I told her stories about her mother she'd never heard before, about how we met, the sacrifices we made early on, the little things we gave up for a bigger future. She'd be proud of you, I told her, if she saw you trying. Emily wiped her eyes and nodded. I hope so. And for the first time in years, it felt like we were father and daughter again. Not polite strangers orbiting different worlds, but two people who shared something deeper than blood, understanding. Gossip in wealthy families doesn't come through shouting or finger-pointing. It drips. It comes in little shifts. The way someone greets you more formally than they used to. The way a dinner invitation gets lost in the shuffle. The way someone says, interesting, when they mean, how dare you. A week after the cafe run-in with Jeremy, I started noticing the changes. His mother, Martha, used to send out an email blast every other week with brunch invites, family updates, links to the New York Times articles she clearly never read, but wanted us to think she did. Suddenly, those emails stopped including me. My inbox went silent. Not that I missed them, but it was loud, that silence. Emily confirmed it a few days later. They think you made Jeremy look small on purpose, she said quietly over lunch at my house. She was helping herself to leftovers like she used to when she still lived at home. Hair tied back, barefoot in the kitchen, comfortable. He made himself small, I replied. I just stopped playing along. She gave me a faint smile. I told them they owe you an apology. And what did they say? That you were acting out. That you were always quiet. And now suddenly you're performing. That stung. Not because I cared about their approval. I truly didn't. But because of how easily people rewrite your character when you no longer fit their story. I'd spent years being the quiet, modest, unremarkable in-law. It made them feel better. Safer. Now that they saw the emblem on the key fob, the way I spoke up, the way I didn't shrink anymore, they decided I was the one who'd changed. In truth, I hadn't changed. I just stopped hiding. That week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the folders. They were old, beaten up at the edges, papers slightly yellowing. But inside them was every major investment I'd made over the last 40 years. Original stock certificates, scanned receipts from IPOs I bought into back when everyone thought Apple was just a fruit, and a manila envelope marked Endgame that held copies of 3 separate property deeds across 2 states. I laid it all out across the kitchen table like a general planning a war. Not because I needed to prove anything, but because I needed to remember. Each folder told a story. The one labeled Emily's Future made me pause the longest. That was the college fund, the seed money for her first apartment, the account I quietly topped off even after she got married, just in case. She never asked where it came from. Maybe she thought I had a pension. Maybe she didn't think about it at all. And that was the point. I had built a life of stability, silently. I'd grown up poor, dirt floor poor, government cheese poor. I knew how fragile money was. I also knew how dangerous it could be in the wrong hands. That's why I never flaunted it. Not even to Emily. Especially not to her. But now, I began to wonder, had I done her a disservice by hiding it? That question stayed with me for days. Until it was answered, in the most unexpected way. I received a voicemail from one of Jeremy's cousins, a man named Stephen who I barely knew but had always seemed sharper than the rest of the bunch. His message was short, clipped, but carried weight. Hey Mr. R, this is Stephen. I, heard what happened at dinner. Just wanted to say, some of us noticed how they treat you. And some of us know the difference between loud money and smart money. Hope to talk sometime. I sat there staring at my phone for a full minute after the message ended. Smart money. It was the first time anyone from their side acknowledged there was a difference. Loud money buys watches to show off. Smart money buys time. Loud money buys status. Smart money builds safety nets. I didn't need validation, but damn if it didn't feel like a breeze blowing through a room that had been sealed too long. Later that night, I called Stephen back. We talked for almost an hour. He worked in finance, but not the flashy kind. He was one of the analysts behind the curtain, spreadsheet guy, retirement planning, asset diversification. The real work, not the crypto gambling and bragging Jeremy did. At one point, he said something that stuck with me. Jeremy thinks investing means buying something today and bragging about it tomorrow. You invested like someone who wanted to sleep at night. I laughed at that. That's all I ever wanted. A good night's sleep. But word travels fast in families, especially when you shake up their hierarchy. By the following weekend, I heard from Emily again. She asked if I'd come by their place, just her and me. She said Jeremy was out. That alone made me say yes. When I arrived, she was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, apron on, kneading dough. Something about that image punched me in the chest. It reminded me so much of her mother. Flour on her cheek, bare feet, humming under her breath. It was a memory from a different life. We sat on the couch while the dough rose. She handed me a beer and looked hesitant, like she'd been rehearsing. "They're saying things now," she said. "Jeremy's parents. That you bought that car just to rub it in. That you've been hiding money. That maybe you're not as modest as you pretended." "Hiding?" I asked. "Like it's a crime?" "I know," she said quickly. "It's ridiculous. But they're twisting it. Like your silence was manipulation. Like you were playing poor to trap us into looking down on you." I snorted. "They didn't need my help for that." She smiled weakly, but her eyes were troubled. "They're trying to make you the problem. And I hate it. I hate how they twist everything." I looked at her, steady and calm. "Emily, I don't care what they say. I never did. But I care about what you believe." She met my eyes. "I believe you did what you had to do. That you stayed quiet so I could have peace. That you chose dignity over confrontation for my sake." I nodded. "And now?" She exhaled slowly. "Now I see that silence isn't always the kind choice. That sometimes it lets people write the wrong story." There it was. The realization I had hoped she would come to on her own. I stood up and pulled the Emily's Future folder from my bag. Set it on the coffee table. "What's this?" she asked. "Everything I've saved for you. Everything I never talked about." She opened it slowly. Her eyes widened as she read. Account balances, investment returns, dividends, long-forgotten bonds maturing into six-figure surprises. "I always had your back," I said softly. "Even when you didn't see it. Especially then." Tears welled in her eyes. "I had no idea." "I know," I said. "And that's okay. You weren't supposed to. But now? Now I want you to understand. Not for gratitude. For clarity." She nodded, crying now. And I let her. Because she wasn't crying out of pity or guilt. She was crying because she finally saw the full picture. Not the man Jeremy's family painted, not the quiet, coat-wrinkled relic at the table, but the man who built his legacy one paycheck at a time and never needed applause to validate it. The morning Emily called, her voice was shaking, not like someone in danger, but like someone who'd finally run out of excuses. She asked if we could meet somewhere neutral. "Not our house," she said. I need to talk, Dad." Without Jeremy overhearing. She picked a park on the edge of town. One we hadn't been to since she was little, back when Sundays meant ice cream and kite strings tangled in tree branches. It was almost empty when I got there. The air had a bite to it, but the leaves were that perfect blend of orange and rust, and for a second, I felt like time had folded in on itself. She was already there, sitting on a bench, bundled in a coat that looked expensive but didn't fit her quite right. Her posture was stiff, knees together, arms wrapped around herself like she needed protection. From me, maybe, or from the storm building behind her eyes. I sat beside her, didn't speak, let the quiet stretch. "I'm leaving him," she said after a long pause. I turned my head slowly. "Today?" She shook her head. "Not yet, but soon." I exhaled. "You sure?" Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. I married the version of him who used to write me notes during lunch breaks, who got excited about small things. But somewhere along the way, everything turned into a performance. Every conversation became a competition. I kept telling myself he was just ambitious, that I needed to adjust. And now I see he's not ambitious, he's insecure. And he covers it with arrogance. He belittles people who threaten him. That includes you. She turned to face me, and for once, there was no distance in her eyes. "You raised me to see people clearly, to work hard, to stay humble. And yet, I married someone who mocks all of that." I nodded slowly. "We can all lose ourselves, Em. Especially when we think love is supposed to hurt a little." I thought I could fix him. I smiled, a little bitter. "A lot of women make that mistake." She looked away, laughing through her nose. "God, Mom would have hated him." That pulled something deep in my chest. She would have. She had no patience for false charm. Emily sniffed. "I keep thinking about her lately. About how different things would have been if she were still around." I put my hand over hers. "She would have told you what I didn't have the nerve to say. That settling isn't noble. It's quiet resignation." There it was, that look again. Like the last veil had been pulled off. "I didn't just settle in marriage," she said. I settled with myself. I made excuses for being small. I let him joke about you, about your coat, your car, your choices, because deep down, I didn't want to admit he wasn't the better man. That stung. Not because it hurt me, but because I knew it hurt her to say it. I know, I said. But you're seeing it now. That's what matters. We sat in silence again, watching the wind chase leaves across the pavement. Then she asked it. Why didn't you ever stop him sooner? I turned to her. Because I thought I was protecting you. From what? From the fallout. From feeling stuck between your father and your husband. I figured if I kept my head down, played the long game, you'd come around on your own. And if you didn't, well, at least you'd be happy. She looked down at her hands. But I wasn't. I know that now. Her voice was quiet. I let him humiliate you. You let him try. That made her laugh. Short, sharp, real. The kind of laugh you let out when you realize you've been holding your breath for years. I feel like I've been asleep, she said. Like I woke up in a life I didn't choose. Then it's time to start choosing. Later that evening, Jeremy came home to find me sitting on his porch. Emily had gone to her friend's place to think. We agreed she needed space to decide her next steps. I didn't tell her I was going to see him. But this time, I wasn't asking permission. He looked surprised to see me. Not angry. Just surprised, like I'd walked into a boardroom uninvited. Ray, he said, trying to sound polite. Didn't expect you. Figured you didn't. He unlocked the door, but I didn't move to follow. I just sat there, hands on my knees, staring out at the neighborhood he liked to brag about. Manicured lawns, imported stone walkways, houses that all looked like they were trying to outdo each other. He waited a few seconds, then said, You want to come in? No. Another pause. Okay, so what's this about? I turned to face him. It's about who raised my daughter. He blinked. I'm not following. That's fine. You never did. But I want you to understand something, Jeremy. You married into a family that doesn't need to scream its value. You mistook silence for weakness, modesty for mediocrity, and you thought your jokes made you clever. They didn't. They made you small. His face twitched, just slightly. Look, I know things got a little tense. I've already said. I don't care what you said. I cut him off. I care about what you are. And right now, you are the man who's driving my daughter away. Slowly, cruelly, with sarcasm and shame. He folded his arms. I never hurt her. No, I said. Not with fists. But that's not the only kind of bruising that matters. He looked away then. Couldn't hold my gaze. Let me be very clear. I continued. What happens next is up to her. I won't interfere. But I want you to understand that I see you. For who you are. And if she chooses to leave, it won't be because I pushed her. It'll be because she finally remembered who raised her. He didn't speak. Just nodded once, sharply, like a man who's been cornered and knows there's no clever exit. A week later, Emily called me. There was no trembling in her voice this time. I told him, she said. I told him I need space. That I'm moving out. I closed my eyes. How'd he take it? Like it was an inconvenience. Like I'd ruined his weekend. I'm sorry. I'm not, she said. I feel clear. For the first time in years. You'll be okay, I told her. You always were. She cried again. But it was different this time. These were cleansing tears. A beginning, not an end. And I cried too, quietly, into the phone. Because even though it hurt, even though the fallout would be messy, I knew we had both chosen truth over comfort. 3 months passed. Winter softened the city into silence. Bare trees like bones against a pale sky. The streets dusted with frost that never quite stuck. I stopped driving the Bugatti altogether. It sat in the garage under a canvas cover, engine cold, its moment served. Emily had moved into a small condo closer to the river. Nothing fancy, but hers. The first time I visited, she was wearing sweats, hair in a bun, and no makeup on her face. She looked freer than I'd seen her in years. She gave me a tour like it was a palace. There's a washer and dryer in unit, she said, grinning like a kid. I never realized how much that mattered to me. I smiled. Freedom always shows up in the smallest places. We ate lunch by the window, leftover curry and store-brand seltzer. She told me she'd picked up a freelance design contract and was looking into therapy. Do you think I lost myself? She asked quietly, halfway through her plate. No, I said. I think you tucked yourself away so someone else could shine. And now you're pulling yourself back out again. She nodded, eyes wet. It's hard. I raised you for hard. Jeremy never reached out. Not once. He didn't fight for her, didn't beg her to stay. That told me more than any apology ever could. He let her go with the same arrogance he'd carried into every room. Like he believed she'd come back when she realized how cold the world could be without his wallet. But she didn't come back. In fact, she started to come into herself. Her laugh returned, not the polite, hostess one, but the sharp, belly-deep kind that used to echo through our old house. She painted again. I didn't even know she still had her brushes. One afternoon, I walked into her new place and saw a canvas leaning against the wall, half-finished, full of reds and ash-blue swirls. You remember when Mom used to set up your easel in the driveway? I asked. She smiled, not looking up. I remember she never let me paint in silence. Always had music playing. She said creativity needs rhythm. She was right. We never discussed the Bugatti again. It became a ghost, something that served its purpose and faded. I quietly listed it with a private collector. Sold it for more than I'd paid. I wired part of that money into a scholarship fund in my wife's name, something I'd always meant to do. The rest, I transferred into an account Emily didn't know about. Not because I was hiding it, but because that's just who I am. Still, legacy isn't loud. It's not in the car you drive or the suit you wear to a family dinner. It's not in how many people clap when you walk into a room. Legacy is in who you've protected, who you've built quietly, who still carries your voice when they find their own. The family stopped inviting me to things altogether. Jeremy's parents cut off the polite check-ins. I'd become a disruption in their curated dynamic, and wealthy people don't like disruptions. It doesn't matter. I gained more by stepping out than I ever did playing along. One Sunday, I took a walk through the neighborhood near Emily's condo. Leaves had fallen, covering the sidewalks in a patchwork of color. I stopped at a bench near the water, one of those little spots where the world slows down and your thoughts catch up. A young father jogged past me, pushing a stroller. A woman followed behind on a bike. The scene was quiet, unremarkable, and suddenly, I missed my wife. The way she used to narrate strangers' lives, spinning stories from simple glances. I closed my eyes and imagined her voice. I heard her say, "We did all right, didn't we?" I smiled. Yeah, we did. Emily came over for dinner that night. No fanfare, just the two of us. I grilled chicken. She brought a bottle of wine that wasn't expensive, but came with a story about a clerk who insisted she try it. We sat outside, wrapped in jackets, the porch lights humming. She raised her glass. To remembering who we are. I raised mine. And who raised us? We clinked glasses and didn't need to say more. I don't know if she'll ever marry again. I don't ask. It's not my place. But I do know that whoever enters her life next will have to meet the version of her that no longer apologizes for shrinking. She's taller now. Not physically, but in presence, in voice, in how she carries the silence. And well, I keep to my rhythms. Coffee at the same shop. Library on Thursdays. My bus pass still sits in my wallet. People often ask why I don't drive more. I like being part of the world, I say, instead of passing through it too fast. That's the truth. And maybe that's what I want carved on my gravestone someday. Not the car, not the job, not the investments. Just this. He was part of the world. He helped someone rise. If you've ever had to sit at a table where you were underestimated, or if you've stayed silent to keep the peace at the cost of your self-respect, let this story be your reminder. Legacy isn't what they see. It's what you build. Tell us, have you ever been quietly underestimated? Share your story in the comments, and let's honor the ones who rose without applause.